On January 31st of 2023, ABC's Action News shared a statement that was sent to them from Tulare County Health and Human Services regarding what has been referred to as the largest settlement ever obtained against a child protective services agency by a surviving child of abuse in the state of California. The statement reads, on July 22, 2022, through voluntary mediation, the County of Tulare entered into a settlement agreement with Patricia Sanchez, grandmother of JG, a minor child who suffered a severe health crisis on August 1, 2020, while in the care of his parents. The county is sorry for what JG has experienced. It is a senseless tragedy that will affect JG for the remainder of his life, and he will remain in our thoughts. The amount of the settlement approved by the court is $32 million and will be used for JG's necessary lifelong health and wellness care. The County of Tulare acted and settled in the best interest of everyone involved.
So $32 million, that is a crazy amount of money, especially for a settlement. So they must have really known they did something wrong to settle on that amount of money.
Right, because you don't just throw out that kind of money unless something major slipped through the cracks.
Especially in a settlement.
Right. Now, of course, no amount of money could ease the pain that JG suffered through leading up to that August day when the trajectory of his entire future was shifted in the worst way. But yeah, $32 million, that's a pretty substantial payout paired with a statement that seems vague about the case at best.
Yeah. I mean, what they said was kind of vague. It does make you wonder, like, what the hell happened? Because $32 million is a lot of money. And I mean, we've heard countless stories of officials failing time and time again, but it's not very often that we actually hear of them paying up.
Right. It tells me that something happened in the system that failed this child.
Yeah, big time.
So did Patricia and her legal team finally find the key to holding authorities responsible for neglecting to uphold the important roles they've been trusted with? Or is it just that the case of Patricia's grandson, Journey, is so reprehensible that it stands out above the rest? Could this notable settlement be a sign of things to come as society demands more accountability from the services put into place to protect vulnerable children? Hey, Crime Salad listeners. So today we will be sharing Journey's story, covering the reasons why negligence on the part of several social workers is alleged to have contributed to everlasting damages to a young boy's brain. And we'll go over the heartbreaking treatment Journey endured for the first 10 months of his life. We'll also share Patricia's frustrations over reports of abuse and neglect that went ignored until the consequences were so severe that authorities could no longer look away from them. However, we won't solely be looking at the roles CPS might have played in Journey's suffering today. Inspired by an insightful message we received from one of our listeners, we decided to take a wider look at the problem of children being left in the care of adults that are known to be abusive. As we ask the question, is it possible that there are multiple organizations to blame for the failings of a flawed system? Are CPS workers unfairly scapegoated? Or is the scrutiny these services have been receiving lately well justified? Before we dive too far into this important topic, we must warn you that this episode includes discussions of child abuse, neglect, and brief mentions of sexual abuse of children.
This one's going to be hard to hear, but it's a story that needs to be told.
Yes, and if any of these topics are sensitive for you, please skip this episode entirely if you need to, and tune in next week instead. But if you would like to stay for the ride, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. So let's get back to Journey's story and the horrible decisions that led to a multi-million-dollar settlement. Born on September 7th, 2019, Journey, referred to as JG in legal documents, had a rough start to life in Tulare County, California. And it didn't take long at all for the Tulare County Child Welfare Services to begin receiving reports concerning Journey's well-being. Though, if we go back even further, it could be argued that there might have been signs even before Journey was born that his parents' various conspiracy theories might pose a risk to their infant son, Particularly suspicious of modern medicine, Journey's father believed that every disease is related to a mucus-clogged system caused by the accumulation of undigested and unnatural food substances, with prolonged fasting being the only true cure for diseases. He also believed that breast milk was toxic, full of carcinogens, and eating fruit was the only thing required to reach optimal health.
So right off the bat, this case is a lot different than the cases that we normally cover. I mean, normally we see cases like this where, the child comes from a bad family, there's physical abuse, that type of thing. But in this case, it seems like the father has put a lot of thought into how he wants to raise his child. And it just so happens that he's completely ill-informed. And he's kind of obsessed with all of these different conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty accurate observation. And this guy, he's fueled by these conspiracies. In the year leading up to his son's birth, Journey's father came up with a plan to raise an entirely plant-based baby. And it turns out this wasn't some fleeting thought that was eventually dismissed. Rather, it solidified into a conviction the couple seemed determined to bring to fruition following the birth of their son. Dietitians addressing the topic of plant-based children generally agree that for the first year of an infant's life, children need nourishment from their mother's breast milk or formulas, which are different than regular plant milks, to thrive. Once infants are around 6 months old, parents should typically start introducing new foods to their children as breast milk or formula continue to be the primary source of nutrients. Parents planning to raise plant-based babies are instructed to ensure that their child's diet has enough iron, zinc, iodine, calcium, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, and vitamins B2 and B12 in particular. Journey's parents' beliefs were set to an unhealthy extreme, ignoring their infant's basic nutritional needs, as they subjected Journey to a diet that mostly consisted of blended bananas and dates with honey, rather than breast milk or formula, which he needed. Of course, even most adults following a plant-based diet understand that living off primarily bananas, dates, and honey isn't healthy for anyone long-term, especially an infant. And it didn't take long for the detrimental effects of this deprivation of necessary nutrients to begin to show. It's been reported that on October 9th of 2019, pictures of Journey were shared online, causing concern due to how small, wrinkled, and malnourished the infant appeared to be. Journey's father also shared pictures that documented several other ways the couple was putting their newborn son into danger, fueled by the conspiracy theories the couple had come to believe.
And this is where I start to get thrown off because, yes, he cares about his son. He wants to raise him a certain way. But as soon as there's signs of malnourishment, and as soon as when you share these pictures, there's all this internet feedback and concern, as a concerning parent, this should be the red flag. This should be like, hey, this lifestyle isn't working.
I can see that my baby is malnourished and is lacking something.
Right. And the fact that they just kept going, blindly pushing forward, is really where I kind of draw the line. And I'm like, okay, now this is abuse.
Yeah. And the abusive treatment the couple subjected Journey to included things such as giving the infant sun baths, which consisted of exposing Journey to extreme heat for a prolonged period of time, followed by ice baths in a tub filled with ice and water outside, keeping heaters in the baby's room at night, believing that high temperatures would expel toxins from the infant.
This is the type of shit you would see on House, like Dr. House.
Yeah, and it makes you think, where did these people get this information from? With such blatant mistreatment being displayed out in the open, of course, it didn't go unnoticed. The Child Welfare Services Program in Tulare County, California, they started to receive reports concerning the dangers of Journey's living situation, starting back in 2019, mere weeks after he was born. Journey's grandmother, Patricia Sanchez, has always been a particularly vocal advocate, speaking up on behalf of her grandson. She reported the malnourishment and neglect Journey was suffering through at the hands of his parents many times, increasingly worried as she watched Journey deteriorate quickly. Sadly, Patricia's concerns seemed to be largely ignored by the Tulare County Child Welfare Services social workers. Patricia's legal team has since shed light on what happened and also didn't happen. During this time, they've explained in their legal complaint against Tulare County that the agent in charge of investigating the report, Maria Alcatraz, did provide counseling and training to Journey's mother. However, there are no records of anyone investigating Journey's father.
Which is insane because primarily he was the one that was really pushing these beliefs or this lifestyle. So why wasn't he investigated?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ultimately, nothing meaningful came of the investigation. Journey was left in his parents' care to suffer the slow torture of malnutrition. As the authorities failed to properly investigate Patricia's reports and ensure that the infant was safe, fed, and cared for, Journey's health appeared to be taking a turn for the worse. Concerning signs of the advancing stages of extreme neglect started in March of 2020 and continued all the way through July of 2020. Little Journey's extremities were swelling despite not gaining any weight, and a rash covered the infant's body due to the prolonged effects of severe malnourishment.
That's ridiculous.
And Patricia, she refused to give up on saving her grandson, reportedly calling Child Welfare Services 10 times on March 7th of 2020 alone as her concern turned to panic. And can you believe none of these calls were documented?
I mean, 10 times in one day. What more could you possibly do? I don't understand how they couldn't have documented these calls. It's almost like they wrote them off as some annoyance.
Yeah, and this made Patricia very confused in a way, because why wouldn't they step in? You know? She stood strong and wouldn't be silenced. She continued the crusade on March 9th of 2020 and finally got in touch with a social worker, Evelyn Rodriguez, who she gave a detailed report to, expressing her concerns about Journey's well-being. But apparently, this detailed explanation of the abuse Journey was suffering through still wasn't enough to warrant an investigation from the agency. The case was assigned to Herberto Martinez, where it went ignored until June 23rd of 2020, when it was reassigned to Yolanda Gomez, who, for whatever reason, also neglected to investigate it.
Just pass the buck.
Yeah, this pattern of turning away from Journey's worsening state continued. A lifetime of neglect, malnourishment, and a complete lack of proper care from his biological parents resulted in tragedy. On July 31st of 2020, the couple took Journey with them on a vacation to Costa Mesa.
And mind you, this is a sick baby, too.
And by the time they went to wake him up the next morning, August 1st, Journey was unresponsive.
Oh, my.
Journey was eventually hospitalized in Orange County, where medical staff who treated him discovered that severe malnourishment had led to profound brain damage that would likely leave him with the cognitive functioning of an infant for the rest of his life.
It's awful.
The Child Protection Agency in Orange County opened an investigation, taking custody of Journey before placing him in the temporary custody of foster parents. But their actions came too late. The damage was already done. By then, it seemed like the worst possible outcome had become inevitable. When it was confirmed that the profound damage to Journey's brain was irreversible, the infant was taken off of life support. He was expected to pass away when he was only 10 months old. However, it turns out this special baby boy was more of a fighter than doctors were expecting. Journey survived.
Wow.
He made it out of that hospital alive. Placed in the care of his loving grandmother, Journey was finally saved from the horrible suffering he was born into. Well, kind of. Sadly, those first 10 months of Journey's life took a drastic toll on the young boy, one that will forever impact his future. Permanent brain damage will forever hold him back, robbing him of the life he could have had if it weren't for the abuse he was subjected to when he was just an infant.
And that just sucks. All because of some stupid conspiracy theory, too.
And also on top of that, considering how much effort Patricia put into contacting Tulare County's Child Welfare Services repeatedly and advocating for her grandson, doing her best to try to prevent such a life-altering, heartbreaking outcome, only to be ignored. I imagine news of Journey's hospitalization stirred up a lot of intense emotions.
100%, especially for the grandma.
Yeah, and Patrizia, she stepped up to take care of Journey and welcomed him into her home with lots of love. But she wasn't about to accept the horrific consequences of the social workers' inaction quietly. So, attorney Brian Panish, who led the team that represented Patrizia in a lawsuit against the county of Tulare, stated, JG's experience represents one of the worst cases of what happens when Child Welfare Services fails to fulfill its basic obligations. There is no amount of money that will restore JG's quality of life, and we will never know the life he could have lived if the county had just done its job.
So now I understand where that $32 million is coming from. There were so many red flags, and this baby was sick.
Yeah.
And the grandma fought so hard and was just flat out ignored.
It's horrible. It's absolutely just, so hard to believe that this could happen to a child, honestly.
Yeah, it is.
Maria Alcatraz, Evelyn Rodriguez, Roberto Martinez, and the county of Tulare were all named as defendants in the complaint submitted by Patrizia's legal team. Among other allegations, the employees of Tulare County were accused of failing to document and record referrals, alleging that JG was endangered, failing to respond to referrals concerning JG, failing to conduct an in-person investigation in response to child endangerment referrals, closing the referral despite not including JG's father in the investigation, and failing to open a case plan despite determining child welfare services were necessary. Patrizia's legal team alleged that if the social workers had complied with regulations and did everything that their positions required of them, JG would have received necessary intervention and he would not have suffered the profound brain damage that leaves him disabled to this very day. Along with permanent brain damage, the complaint details several other disabilities that Journey now suffers with as a result of the abuse he was subjected to as an infant, including cortical visual impairment, seizure disorder, cerebral palsy movement disorder, and dysphagia. Patrizia and her legal team accused Tulare County of trying to cover up the Child Welfare Services failures, altering records in a vain attempt to rewrite history, or at least shift how history is perceived by the public.
Yeah, but that doesn't erase the pain that they caused.
Despite this, on January 30th, 2023, the attorneys at Panish, Shea, and Ravaputi law firm, they announced that the county of Tulare had agreed to a $32 million settlement as a result of Tulare County Child Welfare Services failure to respond to reports of child abuse, effectively holding them accountable for the role they played in the permanent brain damage that Journey must forever live with. So it's pretty clear that the social workers in charge of investigating the reports of abuse regarding Journey failed that little boy horrendously. But here's where we want to broaden our scope a little as we turn a critical eye to the systems that allowed this to happen. Bringing awareness to these heartbreaking but important topics motivates us to continue sharing these stories with you through our weekly podcast, all in hopes that using our voices to advocate for victims might make a difference somehow. However, we also know that beyond spreading awareness, the discussions that follow are most important. We encourage our listeners to join in on the conversation as your input truly is a valuable part of the process. In recognition of this, we want to share a message we received from one of our listeners who has worked in CPS for over 18 years as an investigator and has been in the field for 25 years. So she reached out to us to tell us that she's been listening to our podcast for a while, and she feels like recently we've been targeting CPS and categorizing all CPS agencies together, when the truth is more complex. She went on to share that working in the field is a thankless job, as proven by the high turnover rate. Workers who aren't properly trained must deal with unsupportive management, a legal system that doesn't always allow workers the freedom to do what they think is right, policies to abide by, and assumptions that CPS workers have more power and authority than they actually do, resulting in unfair expectations. She explained that though there are federal guidelines to abide by, each state has the power to determine how their system is run, which leaves cracks that need to be addressed to ensure more consistency. And she also pointed out that law enforcement and the court system have a part to play as well. So, inspired by the insight granted by her perspective, we broadened our research efforts and found out that she's far from the only professional who feels this way. So, Randy Burton, founder and president of the nonprofit child advocacy group Justice for Children, shares a somewhat similar point of view. Randy's time working for the Harris County District Attorney's Office, eventually becoming the chief prosecutor of family violence, granted him insight that led to the creation of Justice for Children, which provides legal and social services to assist children who have been failed by the systems that are supposed to protect them. Randy also invests a lot of energy into education and spreading awareness of the problem of child abuse and the authorities' failure to intervene effectively, even when given a chance. Yet rather than just focusing on the problems with CPS organizations, Randy advocates for law enforcement to play a greater role in removing children from dangerous living situations. Included in Justice for Children's philosophy is the bold statement, quote, "Investigation of crimes against children is the exclusive responsibility of law enforcement. While child abuse is a social problem, it is first and foremost a crime against the child." In his assessment of the problem, titled "The System is Failing Our Children," Randy breaks down this perspective further, tackling issues within the family courts, child protective services, and the district's attorney's office regarding protecting abused children, criticizing the lack of sufficient training in dealing with the issue of child abuse among those who uphold the legal system, general indifference to children's allegations of abuse, and CPS's focus on family preservation. Randy points out that overwhelming statistical and clinical evidence indicates that most child abusers will continue to abuse, regardless of rehabilitation programs. He argues for a major change to tackling cases of child abuse, stating, "Advocacy for children's rights must not be left to a social service agency that maintains the repressive and scientifically unproven view that it is more harmful to the child to remove him or her from the family than to leave the child in the abusive home."
There is a strong argument here, though, that law enforcement should get more involved with these cases. I mean, even if they don't take sole responsibility for them.
It's interesting because there was actually a study done on this. So in a study by Casey Family Programs, there were 3 models of collaboration between child protective services and law enforcement. So the first model is the traditional approach, where some information was exchanged between the 2 agencies. But overall, there is minimal collaboration, no joint investigations. Model 2 tackles allegations of child abuse and neglect through joint collaborative investigations involving law enforcement and CPS agencies. And finally, the third model deems law enforcement solely responsible for investigating child abuse cases and making the decision if a child should be removed from the home. And when assessing which of these approaches is best, an analysis done on data from the National Survey of Child and Adolescent Well-Being offers insight, comparing the outcomes of child abuse investigations that involved in law enforcement versus ones that did not. And the results revealed that the presence of law enforcement increased the likelihood that the allegations would be deemed credible and that the services would be provided. When law enforcement was involved in case planning, service provision also increased. The researchers concluded overall police do not appear to hinder CPS effectiveness and may, in fact, promote it.
I mean, I agree with that.
And the executive vice president of systems improvement for Casey Family Programs, David Sanders, he shares his stance on the matter, stating, "One of the most important partnerships child welfare agencies can build is a meaningful collaboration with their local police departments. Historically, child protection agencies have either not worked with law enforcement at all or done so in a very limited data sharing capacity. These traditional models prohibit law enforcement from meeting its mandate to protect and serve, and places children and the agency at risk of harm. A true partnership with clarity about roles and responsibilities is essential to improving child safety. Now, on the other side of the issue are those who argue that CPS is too quick sometimes to remove children from their families. Parents who have been unfairly separated from their beloved children, who advocate for more thorough investigations as opposed to hastily removals, such as in the case of Jackie and Juan Boatwright, who brought their daughter Evelyn Boatwright to Cook Children's Hospital in February of 2024 after they noticed the 6-week-old baby twitching and vomiting. Upon discovering that little Evelyn was suffering from a partially healed fractured rib and a small brain bleed, the hospital staff reported Jackie and Juan to CPS, and Evelyn was removed from their care without a proper investigation. 9 months later, a judge agreed that Jackie and Juan had been falsely accused of child abuse and returned Evelyn back to her parents. And it turns out that Evelyn's injuries were the result of a traumatic birth, which involved being stuck in her mother's birth canal for 12 hours, followed by an emergency C-section. So, it's clear that the investigative process following reports of child abuse needs an upgrade. Changes that might only be able to happen if the responsibility for undertaking such an important task becomes a wider spread effort. However, the issues facing victims of child abuse and neglect expands even further than the immediate need to ensure that children are protected from harmful, sometimes even deadly, living situations. And there's also the issue of what happens to children once they are removed from abusive households. Statistics show that children who end up in the system are more likely to be victims of crimes, experience intimate partner violence, get arrested for crimes they committed, and be diagnosed with drug dependence, all while being less likely to graduate high school or receive their GED. Maybe it's time to put more pressure and more effort into providing stronger, well-rounded support systems to victims of abuse. Holding CPS organizations accountable for their negligence while calling for reinforcements to provide a safety net to catch the many children who continue to fall through the cracks. With so many factors to consider, the issues around child abuse and neglect are a tough topic to tackle. But progress is being made, even if it doesn't come as quickly as we'd all like it to. The failures and flaws of the current systems put in place to protect vulnerable children continue to be highlighted, called out, and challenged with demands for change and accountability. There are court cases similar to Journey's still ongoing to this day, victims and families mourning loved ones who refuse to be silenced. For example, on April 4th of 2025, the County of Los Angeles posted an update on their website about a lawsuit brought against them on behalf of survivors of sexual abuse who were victimized at McLaren Hall and county juvenile detention centers, announcing what is set to be the largest settlement on behalf of sexual assault survivors in U.S. history. The statement reads, Los Angeles County has reached a $4 billion tentative agreement to settle more than 6,800 sexual abuse claims dating back to 1959.
Wow.
This is just one of the many successes that marks progress in the fight for accountability and real consequences for appalling failures to protect vulnerable children. Continuous efforts are being made to push for change, which I think is a reason to be optimistic. A somewhat unusual part of Tulare County's settlement with Patricia Sanchez includes the agency agreeing to implement new policies and software to better track and follow up on reports of abuse. It's a glimmer of hope that if we keep bringing attention to these issues, things will change. In the meantime, we can all do our part to contribute to building safer communities for children. Simple things like providing support to the children and parents in your community can allow for issues to be addressed much sooner as they reveal themselves in vulnerable conversations made easier once an individual feels cared about. We can continue to educate ourselves and those around us. especially the children in our lives, about the signs of abuse and how to get help if you or someone you know is in an abusive situation. And we can all remember to look inward to ensure that we're always providing a safe, supporting, nurturing environment for any child we might interact with. Most importantly, if anyone has a reason to suspect a child is being abused, the best thing to do is to report suspicions and signs of abuse to the authorities, whether that be your local CPS agency or law enforcement. Considering how lengthy these types of investigations can be, hesitation is far too dangerous. If you're not sure how to get in contact with your state-specific services, the Child Welfare Information Gateway website offers a list of state-by-state child abuse and neglect reporting numbers. If you're struggling to navigate such a tricky situation, reach out to Child Help Hotline for more personalized advice by calling or texting 800-422-4453 or using the live chat feature on the Child Help Hotline website. You will be connected with a counselor who can help guide you in the right direction. With a topic as complex and layered as saving children from a life of abuse, it's clear that there are many more discussions to be had, work to be done, and changes that must be made to protect vulnerable children, just like Journey, who thankfully escaped his parents' home with his life, but at a cost that was much too high. He will never be able to live a normal life, doing the types of things that other kids his age do. The neglect and abuse that marked his life over 6 years ago may be over, but many of the physical effects, including severe brain damage, are all too permanent. This is why, as tough as these cases are to cover, we believe that it's so important to spread awareness of these topics and advocate for change. Please share today's episode on social media and leave a comment to contribute to this ongoing discussion. As always, we are so grateful for our Crime Salad Patreon and Apple subscribers. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us play our part in continuing these necessary conversations. And thank you for tuning in. We're honored to be given this chance to share these impactful stories with an audience who cares enough to speak up, even if it's to push back on our own perspective, as we do our best to lend our voice to those who have been unfairly silenced. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next week for another deep dive into the stories that need to be told.